start going over this, I think we need to settle two questions. One, at our last meeting, we talked about only having data centers in the light industrial zone. And this proposed ordinance calls for office flex commercial. And I did look at the definition of office flex commercial. I personally don't think data centers fit in that description at all. So what's the plan commission's?
I was surprised to see the other area.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. In form, if not in content, these buildings tend to look a lot like warehouses, and we don't allow warehouses in the light industrial now, so I'm not sure why we would open up that district for this particular use. I don't. The other point I make is if you look at the zoning map, and that's why I asked Jeff about that this morning. The light industrial districts, I think, are generally closer to residential districts than the office flex districts. I had that backwards. The office flex districts are generally closer to residential districts than the light industrial ones. And if we're concerned about impact on residential neighborhoods, I just don't know why we put them in those districts.
So it's consensus of the
I
board that
agree with
we
that.
want to go to light industrial?
Yes.
Thank you. And the second question is, we received an email from the engineer that we talked about the number of parcels of land and met certain area requirements in the office flex and the light industrial. Do we want to consider that as part of this ordinance? Because right now, there's nothing in this ordinance about minimum parcel sizes.
Well, I think so you understand, the reason office flex commercial was included in the calculation wasn't because of the use, even if it fit, it was trying to come up with a format that allowed for enough properties within the township to possibly be utilized for this type of a use without somebody trying to challenge it and say, well, light industrial only allows me 3 properties at 20 acres, and I'm stuck, right? So you're still exclusionary by the fact.
Do you think that would be considered exclusionary?
So I think this is difficult to talk about without Dan's label here because he had those insight about the actual reality of how many parcels can be developed on. I will say a challenge to constitutionality, it's not necessarily an offense to say our existing ordinances don't permit buildings that fall under the data center categorization because you could always do a zoning overlay district and make your own zoning district for data centers. So really it comes down to how many parcels can feasibly be developed and is that a reasonable number? So it's kind of a balance and there's no exact answer. I think this might be one that we have to wait for Dan's label on because it sounds like it really comes down to parcel numbers.
Well, that gets to our minimum lot size, required to in terms of how many lots would be available.
Can I offer a thought here? I respect our solicitor's opinion, but I don't think having only 4 or 5 possible parcels available makes the ordinance effective. That doesn't strike me as a correct conclusion. If there's parcels available, there's parcels available. The other thing that struck me looking at this is, I have projects in the city where developers are perfectly willing to go out and buy, in one case, 12 lots adjoining each other to get enough land to build an apartment building. Now, if a developer is willing to do that for an apartment building in Oakland, I guarantee you, with the money floating around in data center developers, they're going to be willing to make assemblages of property. So I think as long as we can justify to a court if asked, there are parcels available. And as long as we recognize that I think the market may dictate that it may turn out to be 3 or 4 parcels or combined to get enough area, I personally think that's okay.
Well, I asked Mr. Slagle to count the number of parcels.
Sure.
Just in light industrial.
And that's a legitimate
20,
question.
15, and 10.
Yeah.
There were parcels available, and all those sizes. I think maybe at 20 it was like just 1 or 2. but there were 13 if you go with a 10-acre minimum.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I'm concerned about is if we go with a 10-acre minimum, let's say that we go that way, and then we allow 60% coverage, 10 acres is 435,000 square feet. 60% of that's like 235,000 square foot, which is a heck of a big building. I personally would prefer having smaller data centers, not these huge monstrosities. What is the size of this building, about 28,000 square feet?
I don't think quite that big, but it's 20, 23, 22.
And that's counting 3/4, where data centers would always, you kind of go what the footprint's gonna look like, and that's gonna be one huge building. It's
Yeah.
gonna really stick out in the township. So I'd rather, deal more with the setbacks and not maybe put a minimum parcel size. And if they can build it there, maybe it's a 7,000 or 8,000 square foot building for a data center, that's fine. I think that would be a good thing. And maybe if we're concerned about having a bunch of small data centers near each other, let's put some restriction as how far apart they have to be spaced. If we say 1,500 feet or half a mile apart, so you don't go 21, 2, 3 right down the road. So I think we deal with it that way.
I tend to agree. I think part of the answer, but let me approach it slightly different. I think the setback is a legitimate question. And frankly, I think 100 feet is too low. I prefer to see closer to 100. Number one. Number two, what's not clear in this draft ordinance is either impervious coverage or parking requirements. And from what I've been able to gather, these facilities don't employ a lot of people, so you don't need a lot of parking. So you can envision, yeah, it's a big building, but if the setbacks are big enough, the parking lot is small enough, you're still gonna have a lot of green left on the parcel, so to speak.
I think our residents expressed the desire to have green,
Right.
keep the township green. So I think that's a good.
It does have in here that data center shall have at least one parking space for every one employee.
Okay, but that's gonna be, in practice, that may be 10.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, they also
And-
talk
and
about
so maybe that would be expressed as a
overlap
a
between
maximum,
shifts, so you gotta
yeah.
have enough people for shifts to park.
Just on the minimum lot size requirement issue, I noticed some of the other local ordinances have, they split up data center small, data center medium, data center large, and they have different lot size requirements for each of those three categories. Is that typical? And if it is, is that something we should consider for this ordinance?
So, let me take it one at a time. First off, when it comes to all these decisions, you're correct in that there's no saying if something is challenged, what will be permitted and what will be found to be unconstitutional. There are some cases, wireless cell facilities, where a court held that 1% of parcels would fit that use and it was okay. So it's really tricky. It's kind of comes down to your assumption of risk and the balancing test in general. So you're right, there is no required amount of lots we need to provide. There's no answer there. It's just a question of how confident do you feel in creating an ordinance and the likelihood it may be challenged. So you can defend against a challenge even if there's only very few lots, you just may not succeed. In terms of the definition of data centers, you can split it into size based on energy output. You can split it into size based on physical mass. If you're splitting the definitions, then my instinct is to say that you would need to be sure, you have to do the analysis of fair use and the parcel availability for all. If you don't split the definitions by size, then it's more, you're kind of considering how many parcels can be used for data centers in general. Whereas if you split them into hyperscale or campus, then you have to consider that use.
Well, I saw a couple of ordinances that said, for example, a small data center would be a facility less than 50,000 square feet. And in that case, it would be a minimum lot size of 10 acres. For a medium facility between 50 and 500,000 square feet, it would be a minimum of 50 acres. And for a large data center over 500,000 square feet, it would require 300 acres. Now that's in a couple of the local ordinances. I'm I'm not saying we should do that, but, that seems like one way some of these local area municipalities are addressing this. I don't know
Yeah.
whether that's something we should consider.
I mean, it's something I've seen, but it's typically in larger townships who have far more land that is usable for this purpose. In this case, if we're starting out with so few lots and we're talking about cutting them so significantly, I don't know how much wiggle room there is to really differentiate further. But again, there is no hard and fast rule on this, there haven't been cases on it, so you really can do anything that you're imagining. It just would come down to, it's gonna be a rational basis analysis. If you do get challenged, you have to defend, but
Well, I would think our topography would probably limit the size of the data center to begin with, because we're
Yeah.
kind of limited in flat areas. And I think most of our light industrial areas tend to be the flatter portion of the township. You can't build up the hill. Well, you can do almost anything you want. You have to move a heck of a lot of dirt.
yeah. Yeah, and that was, again, Dan Slagle had most to say about that, and he gave some insight just about practically how it all plays out. I think there are, you can adjust the setbacks, the landscape buffer, and you can add additional sensitive receptor requirements there. If you're most concerned about those lots that are approaching residential developments, you can have increased setbacks only for those parcels that are adjacent to those. So I don't know if that would fit more as a way to potentially let some more land be usable.
Yeah, that would make sense, have a bigger setback with this budding property as either residential with a light industrial district or not. Or if it's zoned residential, then you want a bigger setback than if you're next door to one of our businesses.
And you have an email to that effect tonight, right in front of you, that came in today to Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
She went at
From a resident.
1,500 feet.
Yeah, 1,500 is a little extreme. So we're gonna get challenged on that.
I
We're not
think
gonna
that
probably-
would be very challenging, because you have to have a lot that's over half a mile wide just to put a building on it.
Yeah.
So you gotta think she's really extreme.
So do we even want to consider minimum lot size or not? Or do we want to
Well, my
only
question
hang
to
in
you
and go
guys-
through the rest of it and then maybe?
My question to you as a group was, if you're like just the LI, what were you thinking on the minimum acreage to go with? Because between 10 and 15, or 10 and 20, you're talking more
Well,
properties.
if we don't set a minimum acreage, and we're just dealing with the setbacks, and if they can fit the building in the setbacks, that's fine. We don't, whether it's 5 acres or 7 acres or 20 acres, we don't care as long as it fits within the setbacks that we establish in the
And
ordinance.
as long as they don't take up more than 60%.
Right.
We have 60% of the parcel.
I mean, we have minimum standards for meter D, we have minimum standards for solar farms now. Why won't we put a minimum on data centers?
Because I think anytime you set a minimum, what somebody's going to end up having is people building the maximum size that'll fit on that minimum acreage. And I don't think we want to go there.
Well,
Set
there's
10
still a
10
percentage of
acres is
development.
235,000 square foot building. I don't want to see that in any other township.
No, there's a maximum development on a parcel of property, which it would, in this case, would be 60%.
Right. 60% of 10 acres is 235,000 square feet. So
I see what
that's
you're saying.
where I'm coming from.
Okay.
I don't want that huge monstrosity sitting next door where I have to look at, so why would anybody else want to look at it?
Well, you could be 60% of that to have to take off the buffer areas.
Yeah. I don't know, it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that.
Yeah,
Those,
if we looked at, Ridgemont plan off Ridgeville Road, how many acres is it?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, I have to look it up.
I mean, you know, because I'm trying to visualize what are we actually talking about in terms of acreage and setbacks. You know, right now, I can't visualize.
I'm gonna say it was 28 acres, but I'm just guessing.
That's all, 28
I
acres.
think 28, maybe Dan knows, 28 or 38.
28 acres.
Don't hold me to that, President.
Okay,
Okay, don't hold me to that.
that's 20.
I keep reading that a standard 40-plus megawatt data center requires at least 10 acres. And then they say, although 50-plus acres is ideal. But, so I don't know if that's true, but I've read that in a number of places that they require at least 10 acres. So, anyway, I tend to think we should put in less than.
Okay.
That's about right.
Let Dan Slagle get settled in, but he explained it to me in practical effects where when the buffer is being considered, there's not as much room for building placement as you may initially think just looking at the numbers. But Dan, do you have a few minutes, or we're talking about restricting it potentially to just the light industrial, and we're trying to kind of conceptualize the size of the building that can exist with just the 100-foot setback and 50-foot landscaping buffer,
Yeah,
and sort of what that looks like and how large that building would be.
so I guess, let me throw some numbers out, since I'm a quick study.
Sorry to throw.
So let's talk about 10 acres. So if you have a perfect 10-acre piece of property, it's 650 feet by 650, if you wanna visualize that. That gets you your 10-acre piece of property. And then if you were to take a look at a data center, and let's assume that it's 300 foot square in there, that gives you a buffer on each side of 150 feet. If you had a perfect buffer distance. But you have to remember that we live in Pennsylvania, and this isn't Florida where it's perfectly flat, or Ohio or something like that. So you're gonna have, it could be a fairly substantial portion of useless grounds because it's so steep. And there's no way of really predicting that, besides looking just at a flat piece of property. So if that gives you an idea, 650, 300, 150, 150 on each side. So if you were to put a side or a side yard distance of anything above 150, you might as well just use the word exclusionary zoning all over the place. It just isn't gonna hold water. To give you an example, the piece of property that the township recently acquired right next to Arlen Park, it's on Route 910 here. If you go into that road there, it's like a 20% slope down to a flat piece of property, and then it's like a 20% slope down to Little Deer Creek. So the actual building space on that piece of property might be 100 foot square, if you're lucky. But most of that is, I'm gonna use the word topography exclusion. It's just the nature of Pennsylvania. Now, I gave everybody a map, and I'm not sure if I'm probably not answering your question, are you?
No, that was helpful, and I don't think it's, again, I think there's no way to really say, nothing is per se exclusionary, nothing is per se constitutional, this is all such a balancing test, but it's useful to know that by, we're talking about 10 acres, 20 acres, it's not necessarily a green light to, like Dan is describing, it's not gonna be a flat parcel where things are necessarily gonna work out perfectly. So it's just worth considering that we need to think about the parcels that are practically available.
So then you have to put in the equation for streams, which every valley is gonna have a stream. DEP requires a 50-foot setback left and right on any stream without doing a study. You throw it on the flatter areas down below, you put the word floodplain into. Let's look at the Pittsburgh Harlequin site for an example. The field itself at the Pittsburgh Harlequins is right about at the floodplain level. I think it's like 1 foot above it. Because how I know this is because they tried to put an access road to that building behind there, and FEMA came out and slapped Jeff in my hand because we allowed them to put, believe this or not, asphalt to pave the access road. So because the asphalt stuck up an inch and a half, all of a sudden it was like, bad news. But anyways, that's floodplains. And then the other word you have to throw into the equation is wetlands. So when you start looking at parts that you subtract from the property, the envelope becomes smaller and smaller. And I have no idea what a data center, how big it is. I mean, I look at some of these pictures on TV, and it looks every bit of 300 feet square. It looks like Amazon.
Yeah, it might be helpful, I kind of think of it in terms of like a shopping mall. There is no set size to a mall. You can have a small mall, you can have the King of Prussia, like they're gonna be all different sizes, and there's not a standardized size that exists, really. Same with solar. There's not one set size for solar farms, but it's understood that some are big, some are smaller. So I don't think there's a set requirement to, produce a massive amount of land to fit these hyperscale data centers. But I do think it's worth considering if you're looking to only allow this in that one single district, how many parcels are reasonably available and what size could those data centers be? And then kind of doing an analysis and taking it from there and just understanding it's gonna be a balancing test.
So on the map that I gave everybody, and I see that your map is smaller than my map, but on the map, there's a little black dot in those areas. And if you look right below the date, you'll see 10 acres or 15 acres or 20 acres. So I think Dan Taylor asked me the question via email, and I think I answered it for you, which
Yes, you
is,
did.
if you go just LI, which is the pink areas, that it cuts it back from 20 to 13 sites, so to speak. So you're looking at 13 potential sites there, of which 1, 2, 3, 4 are in Laurel Ridge, 1, 2, 3, 4 are in Indianola, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are up next to Heather Gate, so to speak. But again, we're talking Florida here. These are all flat, perfect sites, no streams. So,
And I realize this is dangerous for a lawyer to say, but I think we need to be practical about this too. We can tie ourselves in knots trying to not be exclusionary. I personally think are there a few parcels available even if we have facilities?
is there a few parcels what?
Are there a few parcels available that meet the two-dimensional requirements of the open citizen? My working assumption is that a developer of one of these sites does not want to get tied up in a multi-year piece of litigation against the township saying that, you've got a 15-acre site, but by the time I take the steep slopes out, it's not buildable, so the ordinance is exclusionary. They're not gonna wanna do that. They're either gonna move on, or if they really wanna be in a township, they're gonna go out and buy 6 or 7 lots.
Exactly.
And come up with a big enough site that they can satisfy their development constraints and not worry about the ordinance. So, not to shortchange the discussion about what's exclusionary or not, but I think, Dan, if you can tell us that there are, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 sites, just per the zoning map, that are large enough to meet the 15-acre requirement for this, I think we're fine if we move on.
Say that again, if there's 5 or 6 sites that.
If there are 5 or 6 sites in the light industrial zone that satisfy a 15-acre requirement.
So is the 15 acres the
I'm just
building
looking-
envelope?
No, the 15 acres is the lot size.
Okay.
Do you think we should have them in the
I
lot
do.
size?
I do.
And get 15 acres?
I think 15 sounds legitimate to me.
Because I'd be in favor of that, I think.
I didn't print out the email you sent me, so I don't know how many 15-acre sites.
So on the 15 acres ones, there's 1, 2, 3, there's 3 dots.
Okay.
Now, the
So
one,
the 13 you identified, that's 10 acres?
Yeah.
Yeah.
10 acres.
10 and above.
and then the
Okay.
20 is 3 too.
Okay.
15 is 3, 20 is 3, this is only light industrial.
Okay.
And the other one is 13.
But Kevin, as I was discussing with Kat, setting aside, I don't care how many you have, black and white, is it exclusionary or not, you're allowing for it.
Yeah.
And there are lots
There are
available.
lots available, yeah, yeah,
That's-
that's my.
Like Kevin
I
said,
agree.
you can always buy multiple lots
Yeah.
from buyer.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe go 15, like you say, or maybe even 20 at that point, and go with what we have, what's available. Stick with it.
Yeah, whichever one you all, whichever one people prefer.
That's 3 lots.
If it's 20, it's 3.
There'd be three
And
lots.
even if it's 15.
3 lots at 15, 3
So
lots
it's-
at
Yes.
20.
Yeah.
Same,
Yeah.
same
So
3
it's
lots.
like the same 3 lots.
Yeah.
Yes.
So okay.
Unless they wanna go further and buy more and have more space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let them have at it.
Okay.
What are we thinking about 15, is that 15 is the minimum?
Yes.
It's aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's proceed down through the ordinance with keeping 15 acres the minimum lot size.
And only light industrial.
Yeah, got it.
Only
Okay.
light industrial,
Okay,
which is addressed on page 1.
great.
Because I was thinking about this too, a little bit. So, you look at these data centers. I mean, the place that I would put one, would be Springdale. Right, wherever they, I mean, they got rail lines there, they've got, heavy power, and they've got water. And then the other spot that I would pick is in Harmer Township, right where the brick factory is, or the cement block. So you know where the wastewater treatment plant is? Right up on the hill there. And same thing, you have a canal that goes in there, you've got water, you've got a rail system. And to me, those are the 2 ideal spots. And then if you take it one step further, it's kind of like, to me, it's the same kin as cell phone towers. How much spacing do you need between cell phone towers? And I'm gonna say it's the same thing with these data processing. You're gonna have one here, you're gonna have one in Kansas, and you're gonna have one in Philadelphia. I mean, it's not like these things are going to be, like a mile apart or something like that. And it's the same scenario with the natural gas wells. These things go out almost a mile, and there are zones that they're sucking gas from. So it's not like you're gonna have wells down all over the place. So, to that point, I don't think Indiana Township is very attractive. However, I think we still need to protect ourselves from a potential, someone asking around.
I agree with you, we're not attractive position, but we gotta have an ordinance,
But
just
look
in
what
case
happened.
someone wants to come here.
Yeah.
Great, and
Yeah.
just, and anticipating if this were to be challenged, the attractiveness of surrounding municipalities kind of has no weight. It just speaks to every decision we make lies in, is it rationally related to protecting the township's
Correct.
needs and the citizens there? So if you think 15 acres protects the township as well as township needs,
I have a question. Suppose the surrounding townships don't have a 15 minimum, they have something small. Couldn't we be sued saying that we are just too restricted?
No.
Like it's 15
You-
minimum?
No,
no, it's all isolated, so it's just,
Okay.
your ordinance exists kind of in its own realm, because it's suited to the needs of your township.
so as we go through here, we're looking at light industrial only and 15-acre minimum lot size.
Correct.
Okay, so page 1, the only thing we gotta change there is to take off the office works commercial.
Yes.
Now I got it.
You got another one?
I got another one.
Okay, Kevin, what else?
I would like to discuss the 100-foot setback from adjoining property
We're on
lines.
page 1.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Those things also pop up on page 3.
Well, let's talk about, does anybody have anything on page 2 then?
Just again, taking it out of office flex.
Yeah.
And there's two ins there in section 2.
Okay, Kevin, page 3.
Okay, so we got the light industrial in 8A. back to 15 acres in 8B, right?
Yes.
When we go down to the setbacks,
So,
from what I read, 200 feet seems to be the safe.
In the solar reg, it's 150 feet for
for the ground mounted
ground
solar.
mounted
Yeah.
things that we talked about quite a bit. And
Yeah.
we're gonna be sort of
Reset.
going
So-
through that, yes.
For
Yeah.
this,
But you can change that with also saying that the buffer zone, you know, the trees and everything doesn't include into that setback. And you can get another 50 out of it.
Either way, I'd like to see a 200-foot separation from sunset reception areas.
Yeah, from residential.
Yeah.
okay,
Any kind of residential.
Any kind of residential.
Yeah.
Whether it's zoned residential or not, it's residential, or we have 200 feet.
yeah. And do you want, we defined sensitive receptors on page 2, and there's a few additional aspects included in there. So any residential use, but then there's also school preschools. Do you want to make that 200 setback for sensitive receptors or just the residential?
No, I was
Okay.
thinking all of those.
Perfect. So 200. And then for, there's the landscape buffer, if it's included in the setback or not. And if you want that, as of right now, it's 100-foot setback and then a 50-foot landscape buffer. Do we have an opinion on how we're breaking it down in terms of just a straight setback and a or a landscape buffer? So this is the reflection of multiple different conflicting
Right,
opinions.
okay.
And me just marking down all my notes. We need to get solid answers and then it all will reflect the group consensus because everyone was wildly across the board. There's parking right now is permitted in the setback. The landscape, I mean, I think you can effectively kind of accomplish the same end result, just based on how you wanna break down the numbers. So,
Where are we standing with this?
so last meeting, we decided to move the landscape buffer from 25 to 50 feet. You could do a, 150-foot setback for sensitive receptors with an additional 50 feet landscape buffer, or you could do a 200-foot setback, and the landscape buffer is 50 feet and can be included with it. It's really up to you, it's the
I
same.
include the buffer in the
Yeah.
setback.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
Makes it easier. Yeah. Is this, on page 3, the, lot coverage is 60%, is that the same for the other light industrial?
Yes, it should be,
It is.
yeah.
I didn't have time to look that up. My computer was giving me a hard time to look at.
I believe it's the same, these all, the height restrictions are also the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 60%.
That's where all the-
Yeah. So, for all other setbacks not involving sensitive receptors, did we want to, what did we want for that number?
100 or 150?
Oh, I'm liking to keep it with the solar, at least we started that, do 150.
Okay.
Do you wanna include, you're including the 50 of the buffer zone for the, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Anything on page 4?
Couple of thoughts, sorry. So it's touched on, or at least the words are used in here, regarding security for these facilities. But, I think that may be something that the township in particular wants to pay more attention to, in the sense that, and I hate to put it this way, but, these things can be targets. They typically, my understanding is they typically include some sort of, guard house, manned facility, 24/7
Right.
at the entrance. So I think in the written narrative, it should be more clear that that township ought to expect some sort of, report on how the facility will be secured, and that
that is one of the points to bring up at the end, to potentially add in. It might be better to remove the ambiguity and just make explicit requirements.
Yes.
Okay, so do we wanna do a perimeter fence?
And actually, that's something else I had noted, because the way it was written, it says fencing of the property is permitted. I was gonna say that should be required.
Required perimeter fence,
Yeah.
do we have an opinion? I've seen 7 feet tall as a typical size for that, do we want it lower, higher for a perimeter fence?
I would go at least 8 feet tall,
Sure.
because that's the height they say for Pete Deer.
That's true. Okay, 8 feet tall.
Dan, now you can implement your barbed wire. Always one of them are on detention basis.
So, the
And-
township standard right now is 6 feet plus barbed wire on top.
We don't want that going on top of it, especially adjacent to residential areas.
So
Just make it 8.
Let's make it 8.
you wanna keep it as 8?
Yeah.
Okay. Could be, again, something that could weigh a little riskier, but I respect you're willing to take. And then you said you prefer having a live 24-hour
Yes.
individual monitoring. And we'll make sure that you have 24-hour access as needed.
Right.
And I think something later on said if there's a guardhouse, that could be inside the buffer area.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I put that in. Okay, perfect.
Now, there is and frankly, before I forget this, I'd like to congratulate our solicitors. I think this is a very excellent start. We're just actually trying to make it better. There is a discussion in here about emergency management and reviewing it with the local fire department. I think that's okay.
Great.
But I think that needs to be, in other words, I think there almost needs to be a cross-reference between the section discussing emergency management at the end of the ordinance and the written narrative requirements.
Yes.
I think we're going backwards a little bit, but page 4, item number 4, it ends on page 4.
Correct.
It says, electronic waste plan shall be updated periodically. We need something a little more, what's periodically mean? Do we need something, or is that something that would be set as a condition upon approval?
No, that is controversial because you can specify to annual, biannual, triannual. It's just a matter of the burden on your end. How often do you want to do these reviews? Typically, if you're putting a time frame, I would add in or upon the purchasing and installation of new equipment. So at least when someone changes, if they change the scope of the equipment they're using, it would have to be updated. But we're jumping around a little. Let me address, I typically, after we make all of the changes, because this is admittedly a little scattered right now due to all the different input, I will go back to that first section regarding the application and make sure that it accurately reflects everything. I don't want to tie in the emergency management plan with the written narrative because the emergency management plan is its own document that has to be reviewed with the police and fire, yeah. So, but I will go back in and make sure that every explicit, like, independent plan is mentioned by name when it says, like, shall submit the following plans more fully described below that application section.
Yeah, so you're not suggesting that the application doesn't include an
No.
emergency? Okay.
No, it's just, I don't want it to be looped into that written narrative
Okay,
because I
that's
think
fine.
that could diminish.
Can I have a suggestion? I have, let's take page 4, item 4, last sentence. The electronic waste plan shall be updated annually. And I have another one over here that says that the electronic waste plan shall be updated periodically.
Yes.
I'm
That's why I
gonna
just brought them up.
suggest that we put the date on these documents. You know,
So
Windows have something where you can, every time it's updated, we have a date down there.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
was intentionally kept not matching because there were 2 different opinions on what it should be. So this is more so for me to make sure that we're all sitting at one table and we all can decide how often do we want these updated, balancing the burden of you reviewing it versus wanting to see the information. So it will all match once we get that in.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Why don't we put in, instead of periodically, triannually, or anytime DEP or EPA makes changes to what defines the waste that would impact them.
Good idea. I'm gonna look make sure, if, we might have to reword it to, or if township requests additional, like, you might have to be you triggering it out.
That could also
Yeah,
satisfy.
So-
because I don't think we can put the burden on
And
that.
as a township, you can always put a
Yeah.
condition on how often they should do it.
Yeah, we could do, you wanna do it 3 years, that would match with the decommissioning plan updates every 3 years too.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 years for emergency waste.
So my suggestion was to put it or at the request of the township, so basically the township could pull the trigger anytime you want.
Yeah, which is why, maybe, I think that's one where it's not typically done as much, it can be done, it's kind of a gray area, because again, this is a conditional use permit, it doesn't typically have these ongoing,
Yeah.
extensive burdens, so you just want to try to make it the least, the things that are ongoing, we want to be not vague, to be maximum extent possible, because you really wanna be able to defend exactly this amount is needed to protect the township, right? So I would say annually, and let me look at language on that, I'll see if we can do, or as township otherwise directs, I might just add a qualifier, like, based on changing regulations and the purchase or installation of new equipment, something to that effect. So I'll do you on.
No, I see what you mean, is that if you have something that's that vague, what if you wanted to harass the facility and you do it every week?
Right, like that cannot,
It works both ways.
right, so you wanna have guidelines, so that you can say, we're only requesting it the least amount that we need to protect the township, right?
Suppose we have a severe weather incident. Can we come in and say, hey, we wanna find out what the impact of this is on the data center? Because all our storms today are very significant.
I think it would depend on the why, because are you concerned about if it made aspects of the data center unsafe? Or, like, if you wanted to include something in maybe the emergency response plan saying if the township is concerned that natural weather activity may damage the structures of the data center, they can request. And I'll have to look at the language for it, but again, I just think I have to see how to best word it to make sure it's rooted in necessity and not just at the whims of sort of the township.
Okay, page 4.
I've got comments, but I wrote on page 4 reply later, so I'll.
Okay, page 5. Okay, page 6.
Page 6, just an F, equipment screening, I think there's a bit of a non sequitur there.
So equipment screening is, it can be taken out because I understand how it might seem a little redundant.
Well, I'm not suggesting necessarily be taken out, I just think you need to just take a look at it, I think.
Yeah, we need to fill in that
Sense doesn't
number.
really
So,
follow there.
Yeah.
What kind of distance do we want here with that XXX?
yeah, so that one, I mean, if you wanted to do that, the number suggested in the email, 1,500 feet, you can do it here. This is just a requirement that roof mounted equipment be screened, and that has sort of the secondary effect of muffling some of the noise that they produce. And that could be noise that doesn't necessarily overtake the decibel limit, because it's typically like a lower sound, it's like an HVAC system on the roof. So if you wanted, you could put as many feet as you want on that one, I'm not as worried about it being
So,
challenge.
this, I just wanna make sure we haven't created the ambiguity in this ordinance. So, we're allowing for roof-mounted equipment for cooling, ventilating, or otherwise operating the facility. But later on, for cooling systems, we say, the cooling system has to be a closed loop system, which is good. And we say use of open evaporative cooling towers versus facility heat rejection is prohibited. So, are we allowing roof-mounted HVACs, or aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that is not so much the noise, that's the appearance
Yeah.
aesthetics. Like you go around RIDC, all the rooftops, right, the code has, you have to with the HVAC things, and that's all that is my opinion.
But since we're talking about feet, how close to a feet with a public roadway or lot line of any sensitive, then maybe we need to go to 200 feet.
That makes,
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do more if you wanted, I mean, screening is not,
200 feet's actually.
Now, that would be a
That would just be
road
a
that you would
setback.
see, like I have a house, so on the other side of the street, and I look down at that, I'm gonna see all those condensers.
And-
Also, your houses go up on the hillside, so you gotta look down on
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
You
not
know,
much
to
you
just
can do about that.
200 feet, that's just a setback, so there's no equipment in that anyway.
Right.
So you would wanna do more
Right.
to have it have practical.
250, then I don't care.
Oh, sure. I mean, you, yeah,
Maybe just gotta put a number in there that makes sense.
yeah, okay.
Anything else on page 6?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with the outs we're giving where theoretically it's not mechanically feasible to fully close the equipment. So I had a case with a client that had rooftop mounted HVAC equipment. And it's in the city, which has a fairly strict noise ordinance, and some neighbors were complaining. They couldn't put a box, but actually they were able to put a box around it, but in the case where they couldn't, they had this open top structure with baffles on it that significantly reduced the noise coming out of this piece of equipment. I just don't know why we would want just a landscape buffer when I think there are better solutions to reduce noise from these things than planting a few trees.
I think on the next page, you talk about the decibels and the property line, which is what we can do.
Yeah, I guess.
Sure, but I see what you mean, and if you have language you prefer, we can switch out, or I can look for other, language here. I have no particular
Okay.
attachment in terms of screening. I think it's truly up to what you think suits
Yeah.
township.
Yeah. I just think if we're gonna be sensitive to noise